Christmas Eve. Nothing is stirring, not even a mouse. Charlie hung up the stockings with care, in hopes that Django Reinhardt would soon be there.
Is there no one outside because everyone's in quarantine still?
Yes. Welcome to Shellac Attack, the Christmas special mini-sode.
It's a beautiful time. Beautiful time of year. Beautiful time of year to be stuck inside.
And listening to jazz and holiday cheer. Speaking in rhymes. Doing the time.
Giving presents. To yourself, because there's no one else here.
That's true. So yeah, our topic for today is someone who is very, very much associated with Christmas time, but perhaps not always by name. I would say he is actually a very unfamiliar figure by name. Vince Guaraldi.
Probably more people have heard him or heard his music than anyone else we've talked about in these shows.
Yes, probably the most popular music because he did the soundtrack to the first ever Charlie Brown Christmas special, first ever Charlie Brown full-length cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And he created all of the iconic, I think for at least 7 Charlie Brown specials. All of the music. He composed it all. So that dun 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 dun, that's him.
Composed it and played it.
He composed it and he played it, and now I would say it is not only a Christmas standard, but a jazz standard. Huh?
It's an agreeable statement.
All right.
Everyone hates jazz unless it's at Christmas.
Well, that's often my gotcha. I'd say Vince Guaraldi is my gotcha for a lot of the jazz haters. You know, I talk to people, tell them I like jazz, get embarrassed. And Vince, I say, do you like, Charlie Brown Christmas music? I have gotten some no's, but if they said yes, I excitedly tell them, well, that is actually surprise jazz.
Yeah. Jazz by a jazz pianist.
Yeah, I think a very unique jazz pianist as well. Because, he was born in San Francisco, and if you look up a picture of this guy, he has a crazy handlebar mustache.
It's really a glorious thing. It's one of the best in music in general, regardless of whether it's jazz or not.
His look is incredibly iconic because he has these like very nerdy, like thick glasses, and then like this crazy. I'm thinking of like a Looney Tunes character mustache.
Yeah, it's one of those great things where if you look at pictures of him with the mustache and pictures of him without the mustache, he looks more real with the mustache than without. It's like he wasn't fully himself unless he had it.
Yeah, after you see him without the mustache when he's like younger, it's just like, oh.
Yeah, that? Strange things.
But I'd say he's also just a remarkable, he kind of set like a new standard because he really infused a lot of bossa nova and Latin jazz in his music. And kind of like set up fusing a lot of like new current styles, because I think at the time bossa nova was like still popular, like getting hip and popular. He played with a lot of Brazilian musicians, specifically like Brazilian bossa nova guitarists and stuff, and he was in the Cal Tjader trio, who's an incredibly famous jazz musician and what is it called again? Vibraphonist,
yeah, that's right.
Yep, how could I forget?
It's a classic. Everyone has a vibraphone in their house.
Oh my god, when I saw a vibraphone for the first time in real life, I flipped out. And of course, I was like drunk out of my mind.
And you're still working off the high of seeing that vibraphone for the first time.
It was the best feeling ever. Yeah, he toured around with Cal Jader. Am I saying his name right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Like a couple of times. Like he went through a period. He was in the original trio, and then he like took a break and like did his own thing and like went back eventually.
Yeah.
But there's, I don't know, just something about Vince Guaraldi's music and his songs becoming Christmas standards when they came out for the Charlie Brown special. Then I think, I don't know, I don't know where you were when you first saw the Charlie Brown Christmas special or heard this music, but it like hits a tiny pea part of my brain that says it's Christmas time.
Yeah.
It's holiday time.
And it does that for me in an amazing way without setting off any of the damn it Christmas music again feeling of like you go into a store and they're playing the same Christmas music over and over again for 30 days and it gets tiring after a while, but Vince Guaraldi's music doesn't do that to me. It's always fresh to hear.
Yes, it's very, very refreshing, I think. And I think a lot of people would think it would be odd to, and especially at the time they did think it was odd to choose jazz as the music for a children's show.
Yeah.
And a children's show that had never been aired before. So I can talk a little bit about how that happened if you don't know, Charlie.
Well, maybe you should tell me because I don't know.
You don't?
But maybe we should listen to a track first.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. We can start with Linus and Lucy. We're only going to play the Christmas holiday songs.
It is Christmas.
Linus and Lucy was the first track that he made for the Charlie Brown Christmas special. So let's give it a nice listen. So that track you just heard is the iconic Charlie Brown music.
It is. And who wrote that piece?
Vince Guaraldi, of course. Of course. And I think it's such an iconic song now that you would be surprised to hear an earlier song that he did. And the song that actually introduced himself into the Peanuts world. So Vince Guaraldi, actually, before Peanuts, he had won a Grammy. He was a fairly well-known musician with this single from an album called Black Orpheus. The song is called Cast Your Fate into the Wind. And it also has become sort of like a jazz standard. Yeah. It was actually like improvised kind of on the spot when he did it. But what they did with this single, which was very unusual to promote it, they actually, this radio station that got it played it every 2 hours on the radio.
Well, that's what they do with the new hits of the day, isn't it?
And there was a producer who was in San Francisco at the time, and it actually came on the radio, Cast Your Fate into the Wind. And if you listen to Cast Your Fate into the Wind, it sounds very, very much like Linus and Lucy. And so this producer, I think there's like this famous imagery of him crossing the Golden Gate Bridge in a car, and he's listening to this song, and he says something along the lines of like, this really set the scene. It was very light and airy, and it really was scenic, and he's like, I want someone who can do it like that.
Yeah.
And apparently they had actually, before Vince Guaraldi, they had asked Cal Jader to do it, and he's like, I'm busy.
Yeah.
So Vince Guaraldi was like third in line to be asked. The producer listened to the song, Cast Your Fate into the Wind, and he was like, oh, this is awesome. And this was actually Linus and Lucy was actually created for a documentary about Charles Schulz. Well, guess what happened to that documentary?
It was never made.
It was never picked up. It was not picked up at all. And it's kind of crazy if they hadn't gone ahead and started doing the Charlie Brown Christmas special. And they remembered Vince Guaraldi, and they were like, oh, remember that Linus and Lucy song? I think that should go in here.
Yeah.
So this song could have been like a lost hidden gem, but it was eventually brought over to the Charlie Brown Christmas special.
And that's how we're still listening to it today.
Yeah. And so I'm going to tease the next track with a little bit of information. No one wanted this. Well, they didn't want. I mean, no one thought this Charlie Brown Christmas special would actually succeed. I don't know if you know this.
It is kind of the early days of television, so people were still figuring out how things should work and what kind of programming was actually going to be a hit.
Yeah, they had no confidence at all in this. But I think I think Coca-Cola or somebody was sponsoring it and they paid for it. And they're like, we paid for this. It has to go, like, on the air.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason they aired it. And so the next track we're going to listen to is one of my favorites. It's called Skating.
And this is another Vince Guaraldi composition as well. So what did we just hear there?
We heard Skating, composed by Vince Guaraldi.
And performed by him as well.
Performed by him as well, the Vince Guaraldi trio. Yeah, this was just recorded with a piano, a drum set, and I think a bass. I gotta Google this. Oh no. But so yeah, you heard the song Skating. It's like a very light. And actually, when I was reading an article and like collecting some information about how Vince Guaraldi, a famous jazz musician, got involved with the Peanuts cartoon. I have to read this excerpt of this person. I'm gonna call them out. Ethan Iverson, a pianist and composer based in Brooklyn. This is from The New Yorker. And it's an article titled Deck the Halls with Vince Guaraldi. Nice title. But I had a problem with the opening, some of the opening parts of the paragraph. The 4 best tracks from A Charlie Brown Christmas are in steady rotation. Guaraldi's cover of O Tannenbaum is simple and jazzy. The slightly bland Skating offers rolling thirds and waltz time. Christmas Time is Here is an excellent song, given extra character by a children's chorus. Yeah, I don't think Skating is bland.
Yeah, I think it's I like it a lot, and I think that his compositions on this album are so great because they aren't really pure jazz in many ways. They are very jazzy, but they take influences from like classical, sort of traditional Christmas carols and classical music, and also television music, and yet they fit the Charlie Brown theme so perfectly. And the blending of all that is really amazing. And one of the things that I always appreciate is like with jazz music allowing itself to compromise on some things in order to fit into a different ideal than what traditional jazz might be. And this
Absolutely.
is, in the 1960s, there wasn't enough jazz that was doing that, and so jazz became very unpopular, and all the jazz musicians went broke and had no work. And this is an exploration of how jazz might change to be adapted into something like television in a Christmas theme. And the fact that Guaraldi came up with these compositions himself instead of just, playing covers of things like O Tannenbaum, which are also great, is really a testament to how great of a musician he was.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting things that you said there. Because one thing I will say is that this is a very interesting time period, because I think when we were last talking, I think we talked about how bop was like a new thing and becoming really popular. But now in the 1960s, it's not new anymore.
Yeah.
And Vince Guaraldi was really, really always on kind of like the cutting edge of like what could be new, what could be next. And I think often about how his influence from bossa nova and Latin jazz mirrors a lot of late Charlie Parker, his influences and dabbling with different things. And one cool thing about this Charlie Brown music, we're only really going to be talking about the Christmas holiday music, but I think on like the third Peanuts special album that he composed himself, he started even playing guitar on some himself. And I didn't even know, he could play guitar. And there's just like a lot of, he started pushing rock and roll later on in these musical compositions. And I think you can even just tell by looking at him, and then if you even watch some interviews, he's a really hip guy. He's always, like open to other things.
Exactly.
And I saw an interesting quote that described him. He said, that one person said, you can't really call him a pianist, and he's never going to be the best pianist, but what he is a piano player. And that he can make the composition. He can't follow any composition, and play at expert level, but he can make the compositions for the piano.
Yeah. And more importantly than being able to play things perfectly is the fact that he can play the songs which he wrote to the to the way they were supposed to be played, and he can deliver those songs in like his own concept, and it's so undeniably him, both in composition and playing. It's sort of a bit like Thelonious Monk, where like hearing Thelonious Monk play his own compositions is always the best way to hear those compositions. And we could talk about Monk some other time.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting, and just hearing about his personality, like even when he was playing the piano, if he could find a shortcut to do something, he would. And there's always this like bum 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 bum, sort of sound in this Peanuts music, and that's because he would palm the piano.
Yeah.
And so that sound was him like kind of taking his shortcut, kind of playing in his own style, which I think adds so much personality to what Charlie Brown music and holiday music sounds like.
Exactly.
It's just super impressive.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on again to the next song, which is Christmas Time. And this is with the vocals. So, yeah, there's a lot of chances that this Charlie Brown Christmas special is taking with using actual children's voices. And they delivered all the lines in the Christmas special. And there was even one girl who like couldn't read. So they literally had to feed her each line before she said them. So I don't know. This special is incredibly unique, and a lot of people thought that because Charlie Brown is a little bit melancholy and a little bit serious, you know, he's in this Christmas special, he's walking around trying to find the meaning, or like people kind of lost the meaning of Christmas. What does Christmas mean anymore? And networks were like, this is, first of all, too religious, and too like serious. It's not funny. It's a cartoon, and it's not funny. And I think that added complexity really resonated with people, and I think 45% of TV watchers when were watching Charlie Brown Christmas special the day it came out.
Wow.
The day it aired live, and there were only three like channels at the time.
Yeah.
So that's like a lot of people. And it totally resonated. It became a classic. And I think that this music is a very important part to it becoming successful.
Absolutely. And the music really adds so much of that depth that makes Charlie Brown special compared to other children's shows or films or whatever format it's in. And the depth of the Vince Guaraldi's music is being both light and a little bit funny, as well as having that great beauty and complexity, and you're able to think about it and it stays with you. And I think that really elevates the Christmas special by saying this is something that is for children but also has a lot to say to anyone.
Yeah, because I think the holiday times are very serious, and sometimes lonely and fun and joyful, and I think his compositions capture all of it.
Absolutely.
And it is just so fitting of Charlie Brown itself, because that is what the comic strip is all about. This boy who is like depressed, but they're, children, and it's more of like a serious, like jaded look on life from a child's perspective.
Exactly.
Like with the hindsight of an adult.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how like he came up with all of these, and most of them were just improvisations from seeing storyboards. And it's such a delicate thing to be able to make music that like won't distract from dialogue or like what's going on, but still be like ever present.
And it's one of the difficult things with writing film music, and it's interesting because it's actually not really the first time it was sort of something that jazz had lost sight of. But way back in the early days of jazz, people like Fats Waller, pianists as well, had some of their first jobs accompanying silent films in movie theaters, and they would play on the big organs in the movie theaters, and that was a way that many pianists in the 1920s and teens developed their style, is by learning to improvise to silent films. And that being able to know how to match the mood of a film with improvisation is a great skill set that Vince Guaraldi clearly had.
Yeah. And he, I think, said that this is all jumbled in from various things like that I've been reading or watching over the last day or two. I think he said melody is the most important thing to him. And creating something memorable was the most important thing. And that he didn't care to write, he wanted to write standards. He didn't just want to write a song. He talked about how it was really important for him to, be remembered and become part of like this jazz institution, like in history. And I think being able to do that I mean, he was completely successful.
Absolutely.
Like when I'm like in a department store or whatever, and then it's holiday time, and those first like few notes, ding ding ding, my like there's like those notes, like I can feel them tugging on my heart, you know, and like this weird feeling that only like that music coupled with the Christmas special like could give me.
Yeah, it's a feeling of comfort. Feels like you're back home, basically.
Yeah, it's a total nostalgia bomb. Very dangerous.
Handle with care.
Yes, handle with care. Yeah, and I don't know. I was just so impressed. I think going over this album again, and the fact that in this album there are the traditional, you know, jazz is based on a tradition of like covering songs that already exist, like having Tannenbaum in there. Yeah, and just continually making like jam after jam. I highly recommend everyone check out the other holiday album or the extended version of this Christmas album, because my favorite song, the Pumpkin Waltz, is a slapper.
Good for both Christmas and Halloween.
Yes. And there's so many. There's an amazing Valentine's song, I think called the Heartburn Waltz, which is a great name. And there's so much humor, I think, in like these namings especially. But if you just like look at all these tracks, there's a lot of humor, but there's a lot of like thought that is like much beyond what it actually is.
Well, and
yeah,
it's the type of music. It reminds me of one of my favorite jazz groups, the John Kirby Sextet, that were around in the 1930s, who also covered a lot of classical songs, and they did it for slightly different reasons back in the day, but it sort of became their shtick. And but they played the music so well and wrote these amazing arrangements of them, and the music is a little bit humorous because it is taking classical music and remaking it into something that it's not originally supposed to be. But that doesn't mean it can't be great if it's well played, as well as being kind of this funny novelty thing. And that's one of the reasons why I love that group, and I love Vince Guaraldi, is taking something that is a serious topic and doing it justice for what it is, but also having a little fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also shows because, you know, Peanuts was like a thing existing. Like it wasn't the giant multimedia Snoopy's everywhere thing that it is now.
Yeah.
But when he got the call to do the documentary the first time, he was excited because he loved the comic strip. And so, I don't know, it just seems like he got it, and there wasn't like, it wasn't a stretch for him to do all these things. He was just like this complete genius composer who could just go for it. Yeah, and just, I don't know, just I just keep using the word impressive, like, because that's just how I feel. And the fact that he also died, I think at the age of 47, and his legacy, I think, has lasted so long. I'm sure people do not like know his name, but they know the Charlie Brown Christmas music.
Yeah. And in a way, that's what matters, that the music lives on and has this lasting appeal, even if people don't know the name.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking us through this wonderful journey that is the music of Vince Guaraldi at this wonderful season.
It's one of my favorite albums to listen to. I always have to listen, and around Thanksgiving, that's when it starts, you know. I listen to Charlie Brown music while cooking, every time. And then I listen to then I transition into the holiday album.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Then it's just Charlie Bound Christmas from December 1st to December 25th.
Yeah. Well, and then you have New Year's music. I don't know. What is your favorite holiday music to listen to? What gets you in the winter mood?
I like, in around Christmas time and then New Year's, I like to listen to some Sun Ra. Sometimes you just need a bit of Sun Ra in your life to take you out of this world. Yeah.
I definitely get that. I get a lot of joy from listening to Sun Ra. The holidays are a joyous time.
Exactly.
I always go to Claude Thornhill. The Snowfall.
Snowfall is great. Yeah,
that cold weather and Claude Thornhill are like this.
And I like, well, depends on the weather, but if it's bad out, I like to listen to Stormy Weather. And it's
stormy weather.
But that works more year round.
Well, you know what happened? There's this playlist that Ellie has, and all of a sudden, like, Stormy Weather was on it. And it was like a holiday playlist. And I don't think I put it on there because I'm like, I wouldn't put Stormy Weather on a holiday playlist. But maybe I did because of you. I don't know.
Could be, yeah.
This literally happened like a few days ago.
Wow.
She's like, I'm like, who put Stormy Weather in here? Because that doesn't really fit the Christmas season.
Well,
so
yeah. With global warming, it doesn't anymore, but...
Oh, no, it does. Well, because all today was just
It's
drizzly.
true, it was.
And no longer snow.
Yeah. Cold and wet. That's the Christmas spirit.
And with that, we're just going to leave you with our last pick for this holiday episode. Oh, Tannenbaum.
Merry Christmas,
composed and performed by
Vince Guaraldi. Although he didn't write it.
I mean, he set it up. Though.
Yeah. In this instance, recomposed by Vince Guaraldi.
All right, everybody, stay warm and have a holiday cheer.